So thank you guys for joining. Welcome. I'm Anastasia Taylor with Alliance Child and Family Solutions, and this is Colby Perez, licensed marriage and family therapist. Also our main speaker. I'm just here to help facilitate. So one of the things that we are going to ask you to do for those that are here in the Zoom event, we are going to ask you to answer some questions. And hopefully you can see the poll. It is anonymous and it's saying, actually hold on, I'm ending the polling because that's the wrong poll. Oh no, it is the right one. I'm so sorry. Okay, so go ahead and fill out your poll of what you hope to learn today. How comfortable are you with all of the terms? Oh my goodness, don't we love technology there? Okay, so with all the terms, again, everything is anonymous. So don't worry about what your answer is because we are here to learn. And while you guys fill out the poll, we are going to introduce you guys to us and a little bit about what to expect today. So Colby Perez, who's here, he's a licensed marriage and family therapist, or LMFT for short. He's been doing tons of work over the last years with the LGBTQ population. He is active in the community. He's done years of research, best practices, as well as internships that have focused on how to help members in the community. So he is definitely our expert. Colby also shares that apart from his professional experience, he's passionate about working with the LGBTQ population, because he identifies as gay himself. So Colby, did I miss anything that you want to put out about your bio and who you are?
I don't think so.
Doesn't he look cute with his bow tie, y'all? So there's me. I am a licensed clinical social worker supervisor. I have worked with Alliance Child and Family Solutions the last 8 years that we've been around. And I'm here as an ally. So here to help learn, share differences and experiences and how a lot of our journeys are similar and different. So the goal today in leading this webinar is to help raise increased awareness, competency for us as mental health professionals, community members, healthcare professionals, and work together with that. So let's get our polls showing. Give me 1 second to pull that up. And we'll show you the results of the polls. Okay, so we're going to share the results. This is so that you know, can you guys see the results of the polls on your screen? Hopefully so. Yay, we get lots of yeses. So thank you for coming. So we see that a lot of people are comfortable. Some would not be surprised if they use the wrong terms. No one answered my latte giraffe book question. I thought it was very catchy. And then why do we want to learn? To be better community professionals, being allies for friends and loved ones, as well as increasing our comfort and students that we may serve when we're working with students. So we are glad that you guys are here. Again, some of the things to expect from today is we are learning together. At the end, you'll be presented with a survey to ask if we met your expectations. It will be sent to you by email, so make sure to check that. So as we get started, one of the things that I think is really important, even though you guys cannot see each other as participants, part of what we're going to talk about is the definitions. And so Colby, tell me just real briefly, and I know we're going to get more into a video about it, but with pronouns, why are these important?
I would say with pronouns is that you don't ever want to assume that you would want to ask what someone's pronoun is, and if it is a transgender individual, that would cause more gender dysphoria and uncomfortableness for them. So I would just say never assume someone's pronouns and instead ask them.
Got it. So if you're here as a participant, we can actually see you listed out. And so one of the things that we hope you'll do is in the button at the right that says more, you can click on it and hit rename. And that's where you can identify what pronouns you like to identify with. For me, I prefer she, her, and hers. Those are the ones I use. What about you, Colby?
He, him, his.
He, him, his. And of course, I forgot to keep sharing. So hopefully you can now see, my apologies, how to go for those that are in Zoom to change it. One of the other things that's important, so if you're joining us on the Facebook Live where it's being shared, is even though you may not be able to change your Facebook name, sometimes in their bios, people will put that or on signatures, because that's another great way to let others know how you would like to be referred to. So we have another poll because we really like polls, and those who work with me know that I really like to do all things forms. So let me pull that up. So with the vocabulary, we are going to look at what terms do you feel most comfortable or least comfortable defining and using appropriately. So we actually ran out of room to use all of the terms. So with the poll that is popping up, you're going to see a couple terms that are commonly used. If you had to choose one that maybe you don't feel comfortable using, what would that be? And so again, no right or wrong, but that way we can see what terms you guys know and where we can grow together. Ooh, lots of good responses. And once you complete the poll, you can see the awesome FAQ here about queer theory. So Colby, give me the quick overview. What is queer theory?
That's a very loaded question. It is basically, the lowdown on that is that sexual orientation, or that, what am I trying to say? That not things are binary. So it's not just male and it's not just female. And then you start applying that to research and starting bending the gender norms and gender roles of what it means to be male and female.
So it almost sounds like it's on a spectrum.
Yes.
Okay. So it's like lots and lots of options. Okay. So, and I know you guys cannot see what everyone else has voted. So I'm ending polling and I'm sharing the results. So hopefully that helps. So with the results, it looks like the terms that we are least comfortable using, cisgender, heteronormativity, intersex, and then it seems like we have a couple that have some ties with gender identity. And then below that, the difference between biological sex, sexual orientation, and transgender. So this is exciting because we're going to talk about a lot of these. So I can't wait. Oh my gosh. Okay, so our next happens to be to learn a little bit about this. Because we are presenting a video from YouTube, I make no guarantees if there's ads ahead of it.
This video, brought to you by Wel Jong Niet Hetero, will explain the genderbread cookie. When you look around in this world, everyone seems to be a woman or a man. But what exactly does that mean, being a man or a woman? And what does it mean when people want to change their gender? Or when they dress like the opposite sex? And how about people that identify as neither male nor female? And when you are gay, does that change anything about your gender? To explain all of this, we need the help of the genderbread cookie. Before we start, it's essential to explain the difference between your sex and your gender. Sex is biologically determined and has everything to do with what's inside of your pants. It is often assumed that everyone is born either male or female, but what a lot of people don't know is that biological sex lies on a spectrum. Everyone who is not 100% male or female is called intersex. Now, what exactly is intersexuality? Approximately 1 in 3,000 babies is born with ambiguous genitals, which for example could look like this. In this case, doctors often can't determine immediately whether the baby is a boy or a girl. There are also other ways in which a person can be considered intersex. For example, through a difference in the level of your chromosomes, your gonads, or your hormones. So what does the passport of an intersex person look like? In Belgium, it is, up to now, only possible to be legally registered as an M or an F. This means that there is no possibility for intersex people to have their biological sex recognized by the state, so people often have to choose the sex of the baby at birth. In the entire world, only 7 countries and 5 American states have some sort of legal recognition for intersexuality, which is not a lot. We covered sex, but what about gender? Your gender or gender identity denotes how you feel. A person can feel exclusively feminine or ultra-masculine, but this too lies on a spectrum. It is perfectly possible to feel a little bit more masculine than feminine, or the other way around. Some people feel both male and female, or neither, and just want to be themselves. To define these gender identities, a lot of complicated names exist, such as these ones. Each of these words describes a slightly different gender identity. However, this is not written in stone, and only you can decide which word fits you the best. When one's sex and gender identity align, for example, when you are born female and you feel like a woman, we call this person cisgender. However, when one's sex and gender identity do not correspond, we call this person transgender. We do not, however, use the word transsexual. Originally, this word was used to describe trans people who had undergone gender confirmation surgery, but nowadays this is considered outdated and sometimes even hurtful. Besides, not everyone who is transgender wants to have a surgery, of course. The third aspect of our gender is comprised of how we present ourselves to the outside world and of how others perceive us. We call this our gender expression. Just like the other aspects, your expression can also be female or male, or something in between. A person's gender expression exists of many layers. The most obvious one is, of course, the clothing you wear. Do you wear manly clothes or feminine clothes? However, also your haircut, the way you talk, the way you move, walk, or sit, the hobbies or interests you have, the books you read, the music you listen to, the movie genres you like, and even the drinks you order on a night out are gendered. So, basically everything. Important to remember here is that what is considered masculine or feminine is incredibly time and location bound. These ideas are not the same everywhere and at all times. A funny example are high heels. While the Western world now sees them as typically feminine footwear, in the Middle Ages it was completely normal for men to wear shoes like these. Now, what exactly is meant with transvestism? A transvestite is someone who takes on the stereotypical gender expression of the opposite sex. Here, for example, you see Lady Gaga, who takes on a male gender expression. Or the world-famous drag queen RuPaul, who takes on a female gender expression. It doesn't all have to be so binary. When someone doesn't limit themselves to the categories of man or woman and just mixes it all together, we use the word androgyny. A widely known example of a person with an androgynous gender expression is David Bowie. The fourth aspect of your gender has to do with who you are sexually or romantically attracted to. We call this your attraction. You can feel attracted to men or women. A person who likes people from the opposite gender is called heterosexual. A person who likes people from the same gender is called homosexual. You can also, of course, like both genders, which is then called bisexuality. Once again, it doesn't have to be so black and white. Human sexuality is considered to be fluid, which means that it is changeable throughout time and depends on the situation. You can, for example, feel incredibly attracted to men, but also a tiny bit to women. Or it could happen that even though you felt attracted to women your entire life, all of a sudden you fall in love with a man. Some people also identify as pansexual. In this case, your attraction is not confined within the borders of the binary gender spectrum, and you actually feel attracted to a person's personality rather than their sex. Another sexuality which falls outside of the spectrum is asexuality. Asexual people do not feel sexual attraction to others at all. This, however, does not mean that they do not long for a romantic relationship or affection, just no sex. Even though you cannot choose your sexuality, identity and labels seem to be very important to define one's attraction. Labels like gay and straight exist because a lot of people find comfort in the idea of belonging to a group and use these words as tools for explaining their identity to others. These labels are, however, not clearly defined. Which labels you choose to describe yourself and how you define them is highly personal and can never be wrong. After all, nobody knows you better than yourself. Moreover, you are not obligated to give yourself a label at all. As you see, your gender is a lot more complicated than what they expect from you at birth. The gender bread cookie is not even complete. The construction of a person's gender is an incredibly complex process which involves psychology, biology, sociology, and so much more. Capturing this process in a small cookie would be very ambitious, but it's a start.
Nice. So Colby, I know you saw some of the terms that our audience was not feeling as comfortable being able to define. So now that we've seen the video, kind of recap, when we hear acronyms like LGBT and Q, how do all of those fit in together?
I just like to think of it as it's just on a spectrum, and you can either identify as one of those acronyms or not, and that you're somewhere on the continuum, and it can even change day by day and hour by hour, and that's completely okay.
Got it. Okay, so it can change a lot, is what I'm hearing. And I know we're going to get into some of the common myths and misunderstandings and how to understand them. So again, sorry, audience, we have another poll. But again, before we go into the next poll, I just want to re-look at those poll results. So Colby, with the result of cisgender, tell us again, what does that one mean?
That is one when someone identifies as like either as male or female, and that their genitalia matches that, and that's how they identify.
Got it. Okay. Whereas intersex means what?
That they have genitalia that can either be classified not as either male or female.
Okay, very cool. So again, sorry that I put you on the spot there. I promise, no quizzing. Okay. So one of the polls that we're going to do is about first impressions, because I think it's really interesting to see how our first impressions with hearing LGBTQ come into play. So for those that are on the Facebook Live, you may not be able to see our poll, but it says, when is the first time that you can remember learning that people are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or queer? And so take a second, participants and those watching, think about, when did you first hear that term? And then the second one is, when's the first time you remember learning that people are transgender? Because I know we split up the questions, and with some of the resources that we have, we split up the questions because it seems like while some terms have been used longer and more widely known, terms like transgender may not be as familiar to others. And then the last one is, where did most of the influence of your initial impressions or understanding of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and queer people come from? So while everyone fills those out, Colby, tell me a little bit about your journey. Like, how old were you when you remember hearing that people could be lesbian, gay, bisexual, or queer? What was that like for you, and where did you hear it from?
That's a good question, Stas. I grew up in a very religious family at first, and I know my mom and dad are on here, so they know the story. I don't know if I think I ever knew of what that meant, and but I do remember feeling different as a child. I just never had the words for it until maybe later on. And I remember going to my first gay club in college and realizing that there was other people like me.
Very cool. Very
cool. Until I was in college.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think we have similar backgrounds, different preferences, but
Yeah.
I also grew up religious background. And so I had heard about it, but didn't really know what it meant, whether or not it was something that someone was born a certain way or if they chose a certain way, if there was a good or a bad thing associated with any type of choice or being born one way or another. And so I think it was much later for me in adulthood where I heard about individuals being transgender. I don't think I was familiar with that until adulthood, but I was kind of naive and grew up under a rock. So let's throw that out there. What about you, Colby? Did you see any difference between hearing individuals could be lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer versus transgender, or did you learn about all of that at the same time?
I would definitely say in college, I really kind of learned what that meant to be LGBT. And I think I've learned a little bit more about the T part later on, as I have several friends that identify as that, and really learning what it's like for them and their experiences, and how it might even be different for how it's different being transgender than it is, you know, being a different sexual orientation such as GLBT. So yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So just to share a little bit of the poll results, it seems like the majority of individuals learned about people being lesbian, gay, bisexual, or queer, primarily between 11 to 20. So that would be kind of that starting in college, also younger, getting to understand, learn about that, while some of our viewers and participants were younger. Also, same type of statistics, oops, scrolling a little bit quick, my apologies. Same type of statistics with learning about transgender in terms of, oh, and it's not showing poll results. Well, it's supposed to show poll results, my apologies. So I don't know how to show the poll results, my apologies, but also that influence and initial impressions, about 81% reported it was from friends, 33% from family, 41% from television and movies. Oh, and you can see it. Okay. So Brittany's the only one that can't see the poll results. She's here's backup. And then a good number of people, various things in books, news, church. So thank you guys for sharing your experiences. Now, as we were talking about, Colby, we mentioned about individuals being lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer. So are individuals choosing to be LGBTQ? Is that true or false that they choose that?
No. I like to put it this way. I don't think straight people or someone that identifies as heterosexual really questions why they're straight. I think it just happens. But I know that there's debate about, you know, nurture and nature, but like it said in the video, it could be caused by many numerous factors. And it's like me and Stas talked about yesterday. Some people could be born left-handed, or they're born right-handed. It's just the way that it happens, the way that you're born. Or you could be something in between. And I think it's a journey and a spectrum, and it can change if it needs to. So.
No, I think that's great. And one of the terms you mentioned that I think our participants had some questions about was that heteronormativity. And so just to define that, it's having the viewpoint that being heterosexual or being interested in the opposite sex is the normal or is the standard. And I think sometimes we take for granted privileges that we have if we are heterosexual. There was a great list of privileges of things that may not think about in terms of, you know, not having people question who we're interested in just because we say what our preferences are. You know, it kind of leads to that second question of, is it true or false that if you're gay or lesbian that you want to sleep with anyone of the same sex?
No. Like with anybody else, it's based on attraction and several other factors, including connection and many numerous things. It's not like I'm attracted to every male that I see.
Got it. So neither am I. So there's some males that are more attractive than others. And so I think it's recognizing that just because you are whether you're gay and lesbian, whether you're heterosexual or cisgender, attraction is attraction. There's different things that will attract others to different people. And so it doesn't mean that you're in like a beacon or a radar and everyone you see is suddenly attractive. So very interesting. Now, I know you mentioned growing up in a religious background. So one of the things I hear frequently, and just to be honest, that I heard growing up, is that it's not possible to be LGBTQ and also have faith-based religious beliefs. What do you think about that?
This is a very big question. As I know for myself and for other of my other friends that have experienced this, is there's a lot of religious-based trauma, which that's a whole nother subject we could go into. But I think oftentimes people see these two things as like dichotomous, as they're separate, when in fact you can have both. And I'm aware that there are certain scriptures that are used that people use against the LGBT community about how it is morally wrong and that it is a sin. However, you have to remember that these scriptures are being interpreted by those who are reading them. And then when you start doing research, there are many churches that are LGBT affirming and safe for all.
Got it. Got it. And I think that was one of the things that I was surprised most about to learn in adulthood, is that there are churches, I like the term affirming, in the sense that you are who you are and you are accepted. And also realizing that that may not be the case for everyone who does come out as being LGBTQ. I think one of the things that we thought was important to talk about is, are there obstacles and barriers to care for those that are LGBTQ? Does that exist?
Absolutely, it exists.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about it. I know we have some statistics and we will not bore you reading off some. But what's the thing to learn or understand about some of these statistics with mental health and just how much more prevalent it is? Why does it happen?
If you look at it at the statistics that and almost all of the mental health outcomes, it's nearly double or triple those for, you know, heterosexual identifying clients. It just, everything is increased mental health wise when you look at the statistics.
So I know we are in our mental health bubble and we do that a lot. So when you say mental health outcomes being increased, what does that mean?
That means suicidality, that means homelessness, rejection, depression, anxiety, things of that. Yeah.
So basically, any of the reasons why, now as therapists, we frequently talk about how it's normal for everyone to go to counseling because we all need support. Life is hard, and fellow Texans, we know last week was hard for a lot of us. And so it sounds like even though life can be hard for a lot of people, that really the outcomes are even greater. Now, do those outcomes differ between those that are lesbian and gay versus those who are transgender?
I would say yes. When you look at the transgender literature, they are even higher. And I do think at times that those two categories do need to be separated because trans people are more at risk for mental health outcomes, just because I believe most people get the two confused, sexual orientation and gender identity. And if you look at the stats, transgender people of color, I believe it was like die every 5 minutes by hate crimes.
Yeah, and yeah, it's hard to even fathom that amount of hate. And I think even just fathoming and understanding just the statistics that you see, you know, up here on the screen about being additionally harassed or assaulted at school. You know, I know we have a webinar coming up at the end of March that we'll send information on about, you know, what is mental health, introduction to the different types and levels of care, and what is trauma. And so in mental health, we refer to trauma a lot, So how does trauma and mental health relate to sexual orientation?
I believe it's a big thing is the rejection from parents or those that are caring for children. Um, and it leads to homelessness and other negative things. But I think the big thing to consider is the rejection piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think if we think back about the myth we had earlier about that it's false that individuals choose to be LGBTQ, you know, knowing that it's on a spectrum like handedness, left-handedness, dominance, right-handedness, dominance, and you can learn either way. I can't imagine what it would be like to feel rejected by people I care about simply because of being left-handed or right-handed, something that I can't control and am born that way. And so when I think of it in those terms, you know, it makes it even more shocking. And so those that are allies for our LGBTQ community, I would challenge you to think of it in those same stances of, what if you couldn't control this and you were rejected for just that? How would that affect your overall mental health? And so when you talk about the suicide rates, and especially with the family rejection, a lot of what you're seeing is that it's happening even with youth. So why with kids so young, or how does that relate?
Can you ask that question again, Stas?
Yeah, so why are we seeing statistics happen so early? Is that when individuals are really learning about sexual preferences, or why is it happening to youth?
I think that's a very big question to answer. And I think part of it is maybe the parents' upbringing and their assumptions and their beliefs about sexual orientation. It could be, you know, religious learnings. Maybe they don't know any different and they don't know someone that's LGBT. And I think the kid, and I know for me, it was like a journey and even discovering what that meant. And I know for parents, it's a journey as well. But I think a lot of it is just maybe the parents, their knowledge and just their background, and just maybe they can learn to accept the kid.
Yeah. And so again, I think if we recognize kind of where we're coming from and recognize where not everyone will think the same way, act the same way, and embrace those differences, I know it's the start to learning, which we will talk about some of the do's and don'ts. So when you think about all of those statistics, and again, just to kind of bring it home with our healthcare professionals and teachers, again, why is it a barrier to actually getting mental health or medical treatment though? Why is that?
Well, think about it. If you're not going to somewhere that's accepting, you're not going to be able to open up about what's really going on. And, you know, you're dealing with a giant societal discourse of heteronormativity. And how are you going to be able to open up if you're not being accepted in an affirming environment?
That's true. And I could see where if you've experienced rejection over and over and over again, where it could be really difficult to want to open up or want to go to another therapist or another medical doctor when you don't know what the reaction will be. So obviously those that are present, maybe it's an assumption, but I'm hoping those that are present are here because they want to do better for their community, for loved ones, for ones they work with. They want to learn more. So basically, what are some things we should know about what to do and what not to do if we are trying to be a more affirming community and be an ally?
I would say, you know, the big ones for me are to be self-reflecting, reflect on your own upbringing, like I was talking about earlier, your attitudes and beliefs, and, you know, being able to acknowledge your areas of privilege, recognizing bias stemming from living in a heteronormative world. And my big thing, like me and Stas was talking about, when you're working with LGBT clients, I feel really strongly about this. You need to do your own research, and your client or student or whoever should not be teaching you what it means to be LGBT. You need to take that upon yourself to learn what that means.
Yeah, so coming to the webinar is the start. Some of the things that we're going to ask in our survey is if there are general things that we can educate on, doing that, but part of it is as individuals, we have to seek to know more and do more. I know one of the organizations that we partner with a lot in the community, Rebirth Equity Alliance. So shout out to Jen Sardui if you're watching now or later, but they also do some really great trainings on diversity and marginalized populations or individuals that are not always given the same rights and privileges because of whether it's your skin color or your sexual orientation or your preferences. About you cannot expect someone who has been treated differently for so long to now become an educator. That shouldn't be placed on marginalized populations. So when it comes to don'ts, I know we talked about having an open mind. Are there absolute don'ts that we should not do?
Yes, I would not assume someone's sexuality, and I would not use incorrect pronouns. And if you don't know, just ask. And like I said earlier, the big one is do not ask clients what it means to be LGBT, and instead take a step back and be able to learn what that means and maybe some of the things that they go through.
Yeah, so really embracing that empathy is what it sounds like of, again, my best parallel is that idea of handedness, because as someone who is in that heteronormative society or grew up in that and not knowing different, recognizing, where that may cause bias and recognizing that we all have bias. So one of the don'ts, you said, don't ask what it means to be LGBTQ, but don't use incorrect pronouns. So how do you tackle that if you don't know what someone's pronouns are? Or how do you not assume those things? What do you do?
I would just simply ask in a polite way. How would you like for me to refer to you as, and what pronouns would you like for me to use?
Okay, that's perfect. So what pronouns do I use? And that way you can be respectful of those things. And so how do you handle it if you goof up? Because I'm sure that will happen as we are learning and growing as professionals. Where do you go from there? What do you...
I mean, even though I know all of this stuff, I've messed up before with clients, and, just apologizing. Hey, I'm, being able to be transparent and acknowledge, hey, I messed up, and I want you to correct me every time that I mess up.
Yeah. So we still have to be mindful and take those steps forward to really learn what we need to learn. Being willing to apologize when we do mess up. Now, one of the other things that I wanted to add for the do's and don'ts is tell me about some of the privileges with being heterosexual. How does that differ from privileges or that the LGBTQ community may or may not have?
I mean, for a long time, we had the whole marriage issue. And at one time, let's say that I had a partner and he was in the hospital, I wouldn't be able to go see him just because of the ways the laws and rules were written. I mean, there's so many things that straight people are allowed to do, and frankly, LGBT people aren't allowed to do.
Yeah. One of the things that I think was surprising to me is, prior to doing therapy, I did a lot of work in the foster adoption community. And there were different agencies that were extremely supportive of the LGBT community. So I thought, great, supportive agency, no big deal. But then when it came time for adoption, a lot of times they were stuck on, well, there has to be someone in the mother slot and there has to be someone in the father slot. And if you don't exist or if you do not match, then they would not put both parents on, which is hard when both parents were equally raising kiddos and showing love and doing the hard work.
And I used to be, and to that, Stas, I used to be a foster care manager, and I know that there's some agencies, they will simply they can discriminate based on sexual orientation and will not take same-sex couples or individuals to adopt, period.
Interesting. And so how can we as allies help with that situation? What do we do? What do we do?
Just keep pressing forward and keep, you know, questioning things and questioning maybe those organizations, to be frank, and things like that.
Okay, perfect. Now, I know we have a little bit of time left, and so that's where I really want to open it up to those that are viewing, whether you are viewing it on the Facebook Live. I've got you pulled up so I can see any questions you ask. Thank you for those that are tuning in, as well as our participants here on Zoom, whether you're watching live with the webinar or checking it after the fact. Hit us with some tough questions. I think the question and answer feature on Zoom will actually allow you to ask anonymously if you don't feel comfortable saying it out loud. As I drop my phone. Okay, so I'm sure people are thinking up their really good questions. So while you do that, one of the handouts that we will send after the fact for those that are interested is LGBTQ inclusive language do's and don'ts. And I thought these were interesting. So Colby, I'm gonna try and quiz you. I know I'm getting you on the spot.
I'm ready.
You're ready, you're ready. Okay, so why is it better to say terms like intersex over terms like hermaphrodite?
Oh, even hearing that, it's hard for me to hear. Those are derogatory and I would say outdated terms, and would be extremely offensive in using those terms with intersex individuals.
Got it. Okay. And so one of the questions from some of our attendees is, what do you do if you have a kiddo who is identifying as LGBT and they live with non-affirming adults or guardians? How do you?
That's a hard one.
Yeah.
Which I've dealt with before. I mean, you could take a multitude of things. There is literature out there about that, about moving a non-affirming parent to maybe a more affirming stance. And a lot of it, I feel like what I've done in my work with parents like that is really educating them on the research of, hey, listen, if this kid keeps experiencing this amount of rejection, this could be some of the consequences, some of the consequences and the percentages that we looked at earlier.
Yeah. And I think, and I hope that, I know as a parent, I would never want to purposely do something that would cause that kind of difficulty for my child. And so I think hopefully if we can frame it in that way and get affirming adults, you know, to talk to the other parents of like, hey, whether you agree or disagree, remember that you're that support person for that kiddo. And, you know, think about the harm that you may be causing if you are not affirming. I think those are really good suggestions there. And so,
not to interrupt you, Stas, but then I would even wonder, and maybe as a therapist, I've done this before, is really, and there's literature on this too, maybe just meeting with the parents and trying to, you know, unfold, maybe where did they learn some of those ideas of how they feel like LGBT people are bad, and how did they learn, you know, about LGBT people, and kind of just unfolding that like an onion and just learning where they got those ideas.
Yeah, so I think as therapists, we really focus on that of, let's take some steps back. Let's see where we learned about these things. What were our initial views? And I think even the questions we asked about first impressions are really good to know, you know, what are you working with? If you're talking to that adult, why do they believe what they believe? How do we ask that with open minds to see, you know, why holding on to a negative belief is important to them, and how can you make those movements forward? Now, if individuals are wanting to educate themselves, are there any good resources, books, or videos that you would highly suggest?
Oh, there's so many. There's some regarding for parents with transgender children. There's one titled Transgender Children, Transgender Teen. I mean, just give it a quick Google search and look on some Amazon there's lots of good literature on all of that stuff.
Very good. Yeah, and do you happen to remember what's the name of the crayon one? Do you know what I'm talking about?
The crayon one.
I'll come back to you. I believe it, or I'll find it later. I believe it is a really good book for kids that are transgender, of how do you support them through their journey. And so, speaking of supporting others, one of the questions we were asked is, you know, if you have someone that is just now starting their journey, you know, and they are just now identifying as LGBTQ, how do you support them in that?
And I was thinking about this earlier when I was reviewing, you know, all this material. I want to be really clear and frank about this one is I don't think it's ever acceptable for anyone to out that individual, because it might be a safety thing for them. And that you should never, pressure someone to come out while they're trying to discover their sexual orientation, and because it's a journey for them.
Yeah.
And really, it's a safety thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm glad that you put that out there, because I think in a heteronormative world, that is something that we take for granted. For those who are cisgender, again, I have to still learn those terms as well, but those that are heterosexual, cisgender, we take for granted the fact that we can be interested in the opposite sex, and no one immediately asks things about, you know, well, are you interested in everyone? Or, you know, having to worry about, you know, violence simply because of who you're attracted to. And so being aware of that. Now the book with supporting kiddos that are coming out as transgender or trying to explain it, there's a book called Red, A Crayon Story. And remember, if you're going to buy it on Amazon, go to smile.amazon.com and choose Alliance Child and Family Solutions to benefit from your purchases. Sorry, disclosure about conflict of interest there. And so if you have someone that is in your life that is very anti-LGBTQA, how do you handle those people?
And I know my best friend just wrote that question, so I will have to get on to her later on. That is really a boundary thing for me. If I sit here and think about it, I just would not surround myself around that individual. And I would tell them how the things that they're saying are not correct, and that it really, you know, is hurting my feelings, and I'm not going to be able to be around you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things we talk about in therapy is if it costs you your peace, it's too expensive.
Exactly.
So there is a fine line between, we want to educate and we want to have that open dialogue, but if you notice that it is costing your peace, it may not be someone to keep in your life.
Exactly.
Yeah. So one question from the audience, someone who has a very similar last name to you said, what issues have you faced being a gay man?
I know that was my sister.
I wasn't trying to out her. I'm just saying she wasn't anonymous.
I went to school in West Texas, which, you know, some might identify as the Bible Belt. And I've been called derogatory terms at a Walmart, where I was actually scared for my safety. Like I ran to the car, called my parents, like felt completely unsafe. I've gotten looks before at numerous places. I mean, there's so many examples I could go over.
Yeah. And so if you are supporting someone who's new on the journey, how can you help them find other individuals that will be affirming so that they don't feel like they're alone in it?
There's groups on Facebook. And then, like, when I went to Texas Tech for my bachelor's, I joined the local Gay Straight Alliance at Tech. I was involved in PFLAG, which is for parents for kids that are LGBT.
Wow.
I did things like that.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the questions from the audience was, as someone who is a heterosexual male, but I'm sure the question could be heterosexual male or female, that sometimes they feel uncomfortable asking others their preference due to not wanting to hurt their feelings. Is it just as uncomfortable for the LGBTQA community to answer? Ooh, that's a good question.
So sorry, Stas. Alexa, stop. I'm sorry. Can you say that question one more time?
That's fine. So as a heterosexual individual, the person said they are uncomfortable asking someone their preference due to not wanting to hurt their feelings. Is it just as uncomfortable to the LGBTQ community to answer and to ask those questions?
I'm trying to break that question apart. I guess the first gut reaction I had to that question is, I would want that person to ask themselves, why is it that you're wanting to know that information to begin with?
And they may mean about asking pronouns. I'm not going to try and assume for them, but let's say pronouns, let's say preferences, all of the above.
Can you ask the question one more time, Stas? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so those that are wanting to ask either someone's pronouns or their preferences, and they're afraid that simply by asking the question that it may possibly hurt their feelings, is it uncomfortable equally for the LGBTQ community to ask and answer?
No, I think for me, and I can say for a lot of my friends, I think it's kind of liberating in a way that that's even on someone's mind to even ask those things, and not just assume that we're straight.
Yeah, that's fair. And so what would be an appropriate time, place, question, etc. to ask those things?
I guess it would depend on the setting. Yeah, I would have to give that one a little bit more thought, but I mean, it's not like I would like directly hit them with that as soon as I met them. Yeah.
And I think for the person asking, maybe think of what are you trying to answer with that question, and why? Is it because you think the person fits into maybe stereotypical buckets where you think, oh, I think they might be gay? That's a stereotype, you know, and so why would we be asking that? Because in the same way, we don't just introduce ourselves and say, you know, hi, my name is Stas, I like men, because it's not something that we identify with, but that's that heteronormativity. So why should someone have to defend or introduce their preferences?
And I guess it's like what I was talking about before, Stas, is like, what is the intention behind asking that question? That's what I would want that person to really think about before they maybe ask that question. Like, why are you wanting to know to begin with?
Yeah. Now, if the question is about pronouns and saying, you know, hey, how do you prefer to be addressed? I would say that you might get some uncomfortable reactions for those that have not thought outside a heteronormative approach. Like, I know the first time I saw it in an email where someone clarified, you know, she, her, hers, I was thinking, well, why would you even have to put that in an email? But it also helps because why are we assuming that that's how the person would identify or want to be referred to? So again, if you are starting your journey and you are getting asked questions or you're not sure where to go, I think there's lots of books to learn more. Afterwards, one of the things that you will see is that we will send you an email and we're going to ask, did this meet what you were expecting to learn when you came here? Let me preface that there's a lot of information to go over with all of it. So with a 1-hour training, while we've gotten some of the vocabulary, some of the basic do's and don'ts, and we're going to send you a full list. So it's from a group called the Safe Zone Project. And that's where we got a lot of our materials. So shout out to them. It will also contain resources of where to get started. So that will be kind of next steps, is we hope you'll answer the survey about what things do you want to learn, what things were you hoping you would get out of this. And so we'll email you all of that. Those who did sign up for CEU credits, who paid that, I think it was like a $15 fee, we will also send you basically a quiz to take where you say, yes, I was here the whole time. Here's the things I learned, and we go over some of the objectives. After you complete that, you will be sent a certificate. And if individuals are interested in watching it for CEU credit afterwards, that's also available. Now we're getting some really awesome questions and comments from participants. So just to answer them while we have time available, is one of the questions says, or one of the comments said, with people that are anti-LGBTQ, they typically explain that genetic markers are turned on that govern sexual identity, that we don't really control where on the spectrum of sexuality that you're going to be born, just as we don't control what families we're born into, whether we're left or right-handed. I really like that analogy, sorry y'all. And that we're all born with a blend of a variety of hormonal profiles. One is not superior to the other. So elements that are hormonal manipulators have existed in our environments throughout time, and that you don't choose or know what happens, you know, when babies are made. So I think that's a good point, is if we think of how humans are created and all the processes into it, there's so many facts and hormones and the way that we're created where you're going to be attracted to one person or another. You may have different hormones, different things that control where you are on the spectrum of sexuality. Any thoughts with that, Colby? Because you're making a serious face.
No, I love that explanation.
It's a really good one. Props to our attendees. So again, that is the end of our presentation. We tried to keep it within the hour. We will remain here if you have any last minute questions. And we will again be sending the materials so that you can continue your journey of, you know, understanding some of the norms, understanding, you know, where we may experience privileges if we are cisgender, as well as recognizing, you know, where our own journey of learning has been. Now, one user asked, what if a friend has different opinions on the LGBTQ community? So it's not someone that they want to choose not to have in their life, but maybe the person isn't very supportive. How would you suggest they handle that?
That's a hard one. I don't know. I've just never run into that. Because all of my friends and family are very accepting, and I guess it's just having a really heart-to-heart conversation about some of their beliefs, and I think it's really important. There've been people in my life that they didn't really understand it, and they had some negative connotations about LGBT people, and you know, the more and more this person got to know me, and he's really close in my life, I consider him a family. The more and more he talked to me and got to know me and what it means to be gay, his perception kind of changed. Yeah.
And I think kind of my experience is, again, even though I am not LGBTQ, the thing I can relate to is my family is really diverse, lots of different races. And I know that I had different friends or family members that they had never considered that my family may not all look like me, and had to adjust to that. And those are some things where we can have those open conversations or talk about how certain words come off really offensive. At the end of the day, it's making a choice of, are they adding to my life, or are they causing more pain and heartache? And so I know that's a really, really tough question. Keep in mind that if you have friends who are unwilling to consider anything else, maybe you are trying to learn more or are on your own LGBTQ journey or figuring out where you are on this sexuality spectrum, there are people that will support you. So whether it's talking to a therapist or a counselor, which we obviously are super supportive of, or whether it's finding a Facebook group of individuals who are supportive, you have lots and lots of resources out there. So again, I know there's lots of statistics about depression and hopelessness for individuals have experienced that kind of rejection. Please know you will always have a safe place with us, and that there always is a safe place out there. So now that we've had our 1 hour, we are going to wrap it up. So again, we want to thank you guys for joining us from Alliance Child and Family Solutions. Thank you, Colby, for your time and
You're welcome.
You know, handling all the technical difficulties that I caused. And again, we will be in touch with everyone on email so that those who couldn't make it, because I know we postponed this a week with all of this weather shenanigans, you will have a chance to rewatch this recording on YouTube, Facebook, Zoom, all the good stuff. You have a chance to get CEU credits for those that are in that are Texas social workers, counselors, and marriage and family therapists. So we appreciate you guys joining us. And if you have additional questions or resources that you're looking at, that will all be in resources that will all. So sorry, I hear a little bit of feedback, but so we're going to end it tonight. Thank you guys for joining. Great questions, great participation, and have a great evening.